Welcome to Lunchtime Live, where we start with significant breaking news from Newcastle. Keith Downie is live at St James's Park for us this afternoon. Hello to you, Keith. We spoke in the last hour and you said this is not the end of the Alexander Isak story. You were true to your word. What have you got for us?
Yeah, we've been saying for some time really now, since the weekend when Alexander Isak was left out of the squad to play Celtic, that Isak has been affected by the speculation surrounding him. In fact, Eddie Howe insinuated that afterwards and said that was the reason why he was sent home back here to Newcastle and wasn't sat on the bench or involved at all against Celtic. What I can tell you now is that Isak has informed the club that he wants to explore his options in this transfer window, of course, with interest in him. As we told you last week from Liverpool, they made that informal approach to Newcastle United when Newcastle were deep in conversations with Eintracht Frankfurt over a move for Hugo Ekitike. What ended up happening is Newcastle said Isak wasn't for sale. Instead, Liverpool turned their attentions to Ekitike and managed to get that deal over the line in the last couple of days. But Isak has been left behind here on Tyneside while his teammates and his manager fly to Singapore. They took off around about 2 hours ago for the latest part of their pre-season preparations. Singapore first, then on to South Korea. They play 3 matches in 12 days. The official line from the club is that he's back here and he's recovering from a minor thigh injury, and the feeling was that he shouldn't be on a long-haul flight. But what we can tell you is that he has asked the club that he would like to explore his options this transfer window with, of course, that interest from Liverpool. So, look, again, I'll say it, Rob, it's not the last we'll hear of this. I would imagine I'll be talking about this for the next couple of weeks as we move towards the end of the transfer window. Newcastle insist Isak isn't for sale. He has 3 years left on his contract, so they're in a strong position in terms of the player's value. They value him at what would be a Premier League record of £150 million.
You've touched on it a little bit there, Keith. The club's stance is that if they were ever to let him go, it would cost a huge amount to prize him away from Newcastle. It's been a difficult couple of windows, you would say, for the club, in the fact they've not been able to bring in as many as they'd like. They would be desperate to avoid losing their top scorer from last season now.
Yeah, look, Newcastle wanted to use this window to build. They wanted to bring in 4 players, a goalkeeper, they wanted to bring in a central defender, a right winger, and another forward. So they've managed to bring in Anthony Elanga for 52 plus £3 million. They wanted to bring in a second striker to come in and compete with Alexander Isak. I told you a moment ago, of course, about their talks with Eintracht Frankfurt over Hugo Ekitike. Liverpool hijacked that deal, and they still retain an interest in Isak as well. It's not what the Newcastle United supporters want to hear ahead of a Champions League season, where of course they're going to be battling on the front of the Champions League and the Premier League as well. They want to hold on to their best players. This is the last thing that they wanted to hear, that Alexander Isak's head essentially has been turned going into the new season. I spoke to Eddie Howe after the match against Celtic on Saturday, where he said, look, part of the reason he wasn't there was because he was nursing an injury. They were managing his minutes, but also part of that was just to try and clear his head and take him away from being sat in the stand and watching on with all that speculation circling over him. This is what Eddie Howe had to say at the weekend.
Alex was with us all the way through Austria, but today, with all the speculation and things that are going on, I decided to send him home. The last thing Alex wants if he's not playing is to be sat in the stand, being under that scrutiny. I don't think that's fair to the player. So if he wasn't going to play today, which we mutually agreed that he needs a little bit more training time, then it's best he's not here. And all I can say is that Alex is happy at Newcastle. He loves the players that he plays with, the staff, the team. I've never had any issue with him, other than really enjoying seeing his talent and seeing him express himself. And certainly, I'm confident that he's going to be here at the start of the season. I have conversations with, I'd say, 100% of the players on their futures. I'm very, very communicative with them. So whether that's at the end of the season, whether that's during pre-season. So yes, I've had discussions with him, but that's not abnormal. You know, I respect a player's career and how short it is. All the time I will be communicating my desires and my wishes to them and what I see and trying to help them. Alex has been really good and he's trained really well so far this season. So I know there'll be lots of noise around it and I can't really control that, but from inside he's been really good. I've never had any issue with him other than really enjoying seeing his talent and seeing him express himself, and certainly I'm confident that he's going to be here at the start of the season.
And it now becomes fascinating, Keith, as to how this progresses, because we heard Eddie Howe say just there he's been really good, he's trained really well. That might change if Alexander Isak decides to dig his heels in a little bit.
Yeah, well, clearly, Rob, he's unsettled, and I think Eddie Howe is going to have to. I mean, look, we know he's a great man manager. He is going to have to do the best man management job of all time, really, to try and get Isak into a positive frame of mind going into the season. Because reading between the lines, the fact he's asked to explore his options, his head has been turned. Obviously, he's been left back here in Newcastle, one, due to the injury, and two, due to the fact that he has been affected by the interest, the speculation, everything that's going on. Alexander Isak feels that, well, look, he is. He's one of the best players in the Premier League. He's arguably the best striker in the Premier League. He feels that he should be paid similar to what these top strikers are, and he's not at Newcastle United, but he's, I would imagine, of the belief that if he was to move to another club, whether that's Liverpool or elsewhere, he would be remunerated in that way. So I think the club are going to have to come to some kind of conclusion here where, does he get a pay rise? Do they allow him to speak to other clubs, or do they allow time and space, and perhaps the situation will maybe calm down over the next few weeks once Isak's had some time to reflect on the situation? But you asked me what happens now. Well, what happens now? Either someone comes in and stumps up the money that Newcastle are looking for, as I said to you a moment ago, £150 million, or Isak signs a new contract on bigger money, or he just gets his head back on the fact that he's a Newcastle United player, because he is, and attempts to begin the season in a positive frame of mind. But look, it's a really delicate situation, this one, isn't it? The last thing Eddie Howe wanted, the last thing the Newcastle fans wanted, just listening to Eddie Howe at the weekend, I was in that press conference after the Celtic match and he sounded exhausted, to be honest. Remember, there's no sporting director at the football club at the moment. They're looking for a new chief executive. Eddie Howe and his nephew Andy Howe, who's high up in the recruitment, have been involved at the front, really, of the whole transfer plan this summer. And Newcastle have been bruised because they've tried for Liam Delap, been unable to get him. They've tried for João Pedro, been unable to get him. They've tried for Dean Howson, been unable to get him. That's just three. There's been a number of players that they've got quite far down the line with, thought they've had a chance of getting them, only to be left disappointed. And then their crown jewel, Alexander Isak, is now saying he wants to explore his options this summer. So it could not have gone any worse for them. Far from ideal that Isak has been left home here at Newcastle, but maybe this will just give him and the club the time and space away from each other to come to some kind of mutual understanding that if a club doesn't come in and offer the money that Newcastle United are looking for, Isak has to get his head down and concentrate on starting the season. A very, very important season with Newcastle United. But look, it's a developing story, this one, Rob. As I said to you a moment ago, it's got legs. I would imagine we'll be speaking about this one for the remainder of the transfer window. It will be intriguing to see if Alexander Isak is a Newcastle United player or not come the end of August. Liverpool retain an interest in him. We'll have to wait and see whether they've got the money to stump up an offer to afford Alexander Isak. I would suggest at the moment it would be difficult for them, but let's see what they do in terms of player sales. So look, not a good time for Newcastle United supporters. They are desperately trying to bring in players themselves. They're in advanced negotiations with Brentford over a deal for Johan Wissa. He was supposed to be the backup striker to Alexander Isak, not the only striker. So let's see how this one develops over the next days and weeks.
Just remind us, Keith, who Newcastle's first home game of the season is?
Do you know, I've got so much in my mind, I can't even think, but I've had a moment to think there, and you're right. It's Liverpool at home. I think it's Monday Night Football, isn't it? I was actually thinking of their first match, which of course is away to Aston Villa, but yeah, I mean, that's going to be some evening, that, isn't it? Whichever side Alexander Isak is playing for.
I knew you'd get it there eventually. Keith, thank you very much for the moment.